name's Miranda and today I'm here to review the book My Eyes Are Up Here by Laura Zimmermann. This book just came out last month, so it's a fairly recent one, and boy do I have mixed feelings on this book. When I first saw it, I was super excited to read it. I thought the premise sounded very interesting and the cover like draws you in right away, and I just had never really heard or read of like a story like that, and it's something that was actually pretty intriguing to me and interesting because it's something similar to what I struggled with. And when I did have body issues and an eating disorder, I would say like 70% of that was because of I didn't like the size of my boobs. So I could definitely understand the kind of, you know, wearing baggy clothes to cover up, slouching, all that stuff. And I will say, I was so excited to read this book, guys. So excited. But reading it, I was so disappointed. It's not bad per se, like the writing is really good for the most part, and I would be definitely interested in reading whatever else this author writes someday because I think she can tell a story very well and like she does very snappy dialogue for the most part. I just think that as I was reading it, it was one of those books that I get to like, it's like 300 something pages I think. I get to page like 70 and I'm like, nothing's happened in this book. Like you kind of realize like what exactly am I reading, and then it's like that feeling just continued. Like it got to the point where I was like to page 200 and I was like, what has really happened in this book? Because truthfully, like that is kind of the feeling you walk away with. Like there's a love interest that she has just like a constant back and forth with. Like there's never any big like conflict that thing happens with them. It's always just this back and forth between them of like, oh, like they're flirting but like no one wants to outright admit that they like each other, and that just goes on for like 200 plus pages. And then she joins the volleyball team. Like those are the only two main things that happen. I feel like a lot of the growth and resolution happens in like the last like 20 pages literally. It's to the point where like it's not again bad, but it's just reading it you're like, what am I, like nothing's happening, why am I reading this? So like it definitely is enjoyable in a sense because it's like it's good writing. I think the characters are interesting for the most part, and the main character is very interesting, and seeing like her struggles and kind of her acceptance is interesting, but just getting through it is very slow. Like you're just like nothing's really happening. And I did have a problem with the dialogue sometimes, in that I am someone, I think I've said this before, but I definitely prefer like a good mix of dialogue and story. Like I don't really like when it's just dialogue and you're not like, if it's just like blah 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 blah, he said, she said, he, and like no addition to, like, even if it's just like, I'm not going to the party, I said, while stuffing my books into my locker, like even if it's just that, so it's not just like dialogue. And it was fine for the most part. It was just kind of like annoying, but there's one particular sequence that after I read it, I don't think I full on like understood what I read, and it wasn't until like a couple pages later that I was like, what the heck was, like, what did I even just read? And it was just so like frustratingly like just back and forth. I'm gonna read it for you, but basically it makes you think like, what was it, Charles Dickens was paid by like the line or the word or something. Like it literally made it seem like she was paid by like the word and was just like trying to hit like a word count or whatever. So this is the exchange, because I had to mark it because literally, like I said, like I read it and then I moved on, then a couple pages later I was like, wait, what was that? So this is backstory. They're trying to figure out, her, Greer, the main character, and her love interest Jackson are trying to figure out if they can hang out together, and she has a volleyball game. So she can't, and then this is where it goes from here. And this is just straight dialogue, like there's nothing added into it, and I'm reading it verbatim. I have volleyball. Can't you miss it? It's for the binder. You're excused if it's a family emergency. Emergency? It's the binder. It's a game. Today? Away. St. Matt's. Okay. Like, what is that? Like, I read it and I was like, they're literally just like, can you get me a pickle? Can you get me a pickle? A pickle? Yeah, from the jar. Oh, the jar? Yeah, it's on the counter. Oh, by the fridge? Yeah, like, you could literally, I could shorten this to, ready? I have a volleyball game. Can't you miss it? It's for the binder. You're excused if it's a family emergency. It's an away game at St. Matt's. Sorry. I just summed up 5 of those sentences into one thing. And that's the most egregious case of it, where it's just like so obviously like what we're pulling teeth here, like trying to wring out this sentence as long as we can. But in other cases, I feel like the dialogue did flow a little bit more naturally, but it was definitely like a case of like, it was constantly like that when they talk sometimes, of just like going back and forth and being like, what are we doing right now? And I feel like Jackson himself didn't have a super lot of depth to him till the end. And it was weird also because like he seemed like such a nice, sweet guy, and then as soon as like they kind of get together, he turns into a horn dog, and I was like, what? This is not the Jackson I have been led to believe. I also saw a lot of people were criticizing on Goodreads that, you know, towards the end of the book, like throughout the whole book, Greer, she hates her boobs. She hates how big they are. She hates how they make her look. She hates that it's all people see when they look at her. And then by the end, she accepts that like that's what her body is. And a lot of people are upset that it's not so much body positivity, being like, I love my big boobs. I also get that, but I also read a Tumblr post, I know, a little while back that I had never really thought of before, and it was kind of talking about how you have to be more accepting and more like promoting the idea of body neutrality, because for a lot of people who hate things about their body, like their boobs are too big or their butt's too big or their hips are too wide, it's very hard sometimes for them to be like, I have to love every single part of myself, like, and then they feel more guilty seeing people being like, love every part of yourself, that like they can't, like they're just like, I don't like my hips. So we have to be more accepting of being just okay with your body, like not having to like love every part of your body and be like, oh, like I love my big boobs even though like they give me back pain and they get in my way constantly, like I still love them. Like if you do love your big boobs, that's awesome, but that doesn't mean that everyone has to. And the idea of body neutrality is just being like, okay, this is the body I have and I'm not gonna actively hate it, like I'm gonna work with what I have, love what I love about my body, and what I don't, like just accept it that it's there. And that's kind of more what Greer does, is she says like, is this the size of boobs I would choose for myself if I got to do it over? No, but it's the boobs I have, so I'm gonna stop hating them and hating myself for them and like dressing to hide them and stuff like that. And I think that's also a pretty important thing to see, so that's why it didn't upset me as much. The most important thing is that you don't hate something you can't change about yourself. You don't hate your boobs, you're not hiding because of your hips, stuff like that. Overall, the book, yeah. I feel like it just, good idea. The execution was just not as good as I would have liked it to be. I liked Greer as a character as a whole. I think she was relatable as like a teenage girl, you know. Kind of also wish some of the certain ideas they would have gone more in depth with. Like there's kind of touching upon how some of the friends Greer makes also have body issues, and kind of it starts to go into the topic of like everyone has something, but they just like briefly touch upon it. I wish they had dived more into that, but that was just like a reoccurring theme. They like it never dove deep enough. It just touched the surface. Like Greer had a lot of issues with her mom and how like how her mom treated her body and would make little comments about stuff, and I kind of wish there had been more of a conversation, like a flat out conversation of like, Mom, you don't realize that you're doing this, but like these comments that you make are upsetting me and affecting me. Yeah, it was weird because it was like on some hands like the mom would say things that were like, obviously that's horrible, but then like she was like a good mom, and there was never that recollection of like, okay, like my mom loves me, so I'm gonna tell her that like this is what I'm feeling. Like I just wish there had been a moment like that. Then there's also this big thing with Jackson and his family that happens that's kind of like an important thing and kind of sets like a whole third act in motion that just never gets resolved. Like you never hear about like what's actually happening with that. So that was also frustrating. I would recommend it just for the fact that like there's never been a story like this before that I've read personally, because again, it's not so much like it's just the body issues. It's not, if you're looking for something more with like eating disorder, kind of body image, stuff like that, this isn't really that book, and it does not delve really deeply into the issues. I think that was another thing that I didn't like, was full on like why she had such issues with having big boobs, aside from like the pain of like, you know, they're super heavy. They didn't dive into that and necessarily and how much it like affected her really till the end, like because she would always wear sweaters, she would cover up, she would slouch, but there was never like a really deep dive. Like I feel like that's my biggest criticism about this book, is it just needed to go a little bit deeper and it would have been really, really good. So I still recommend it if it sounds interesting to you, because I do think from reading the summary, like it does what it says it does. It just doesn't do it as fully as you would think, you know? So I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I definitely do really want to read more by the author. I think she's someone that will probably improve and improve upon every book she writes, you know? So I'm interested to see what else she's going to come up with, because this was a really unique idea and a really interesting premise, and overall a good like I didn't hate it. It was just, again, I feel like I wish I had more of it, and I feel like that's never like a bad thing, you know? I feel like I wish that like you had gone a little bit deeper. So yeah, I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. If you have read the book or are interested in reading it, please feel free to leave your thoughts about it down in the comments. Also make sure this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!